Welcome back, everybody. I am so stoked to have Mark Hall on the show today. So Mark and I go back to our Google days, right? We were on the same sales team for a few years there. He's a Silicon Valley insider, contributor to Forbes. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, it's going to be good, man. So yeah, Mark and I were on the sales team for about 2 years together. Same time,
Yeah.
overlapping, and then you've gone on
Yeah.
to just do bigger and better things, left me behind. It's all good. But now you're working and very tight with the Silicon Valley, startup scene, and also you're doing incredible things in Forbes. So one thing I think we'd like to dive into specifically is around the future of work. You've written some amazing articles about it. I know you have a lot of insight to it, but let's start there because we're getting through the first wave of COVID-19 and we've seen, spikes in cases. We've had a lot of social, disruption and, that's been hard for everyone to deal with. And I think it affects everything. Tell me what you're seeing about the future of work through all these times and how companies are dealing with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're halfway through 2020 right now, and I think individuals, organizations, everybody's sort of rethinking what are the right approaches to be successful, right? And work is just going to look fundamentally different. I think at this point, we all kind of have our own opinion. Sort of remote work, is it here to stay? What are those variations, right? At the end of the day, the way people work are going to change. And I think one of the biggest changes organizations are going to push are far more outcome and results oriented, right? If you think of a traditional office setting, the interactions with people, the way that you sort of network internally, all those things are a function of how you do your job. I think when you remove and abstract some of those things and it's just about the results that you bring to the organization, at the end of the day, that's going to be the new scoreboard, not visibility in the office or who you know, which I actually think is going to be beneficial in a lot of ways. I think the challenge on the kind of the back end of that is for folks at home with additional responsibilities, whether it's kids or parents, grandparents that live with them, a number of other obligations, right? That can create some difficulties around being equally as productive. So there's actually a lot of good data around the divergence of sort of opinion and consensus on how good this remote work environment is. But I think, we're still early days. We'll see what companies decide to do as we move into 2021 within the tech sector specifically, right? Like, our organization, Facebook, Twitter, a number of others have made the stamp that the current situation is probably going to be here to stay for quite some time. So it's definitely wild times.
Man, yeah, no, you hit on a lot of things there. One thing I'd like to dive into more is the whole remote working environment and what that does for people that, have other responsibilities, because typically they can go to work and be able to focus and then get home and be able to focus. And then when they're at home, maybe, especially when kids weren't even in school, I mean, it's a wild time. And I know you have kids at home. I have kids at home. But yeah, dive more into that because I know you've done research and you've thought a lot about that environment.
Yeah, it's super interesting to think that the way in which people are so impacted in a different fashion. If you're a parent, if you have your parents, grandparents living in the household, if you have kids who are no longer in school as a byproduct of maybe the schools being closed or they have this sort of online, teaching environment, all these things create such a different work experience than people who maybe don't have those same obligations, right? That satisfaction of not having to commute is good, but if you also have these other distractions, right? The worry that maybe the kid runs in the room in the middle of the meeting, or you got to stay on mute, or whatever it may be, right? And a lot of people, I think across the board, a lot of people are finding that they're working more sporadic hours. They feel more connected. At the same time, they have a lot more flexibility to get done what they need to get done, right? So it's so, individual, situational, specific. And at the same time, I think it's important for managers and leaders in any organization to be super thoughtful about how you coach and manage your people in a way that's respectful of their situation, empathetic to those challenges, but also ensuring that they're equally as productive, right? At the end of the day, it's going to be around flexibility, and maybe working a traditional 9 to 5 is not as practical, right? As long as those outcomes and results that we talked about earlier are still there, I think things are going to work well, but we're still early days, so who knows?
Yeah. I'm definitely on mute a lot of times when I'm in these meetings just with kids in the background. And so specifically with remote working and what you're seeing with startups, I mean, I know that you're in that network. Are they approaching anything drastically different right now? Are they hiring different? I mean, what's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I'll kind of reframe it to talk about some of the problems that I'm seeing a lot of startups trying to solve. So,
Hmm.
one, I think communication's the easy one, right? Like we see that video conferencing is clearly here to stay. But what are some of the other forms of communication that are important? A lot of startups are trying to tackle synchronous or asynchronous, communication, whereas maybe we can send some video or audio to teammates, but they don't have to respond in real time, right?
Mm.
Maybe we can have some content library in a way that goes far beyond the traditional sort of online document sharing platforms. The way you share best practices today really varies, and every
Hmm.
organization has their own processes. There's actually a lot of third-party tools that are being pulled in to make that much easier and actually share these best practices across organizations. So it's no longer siloed. So I think companies are trying to tackle that problem. And then beyond that, it's figuring out how do we do cost savings in a way that's effective for organizations that had all these investments and now they need to
Yeah.
put it in more of a digital sense, right? There's all these considerations that organizations are going through. Employees are learning new tools, they're figuring out a new way to work. And I think
Hmm.
startups are finding that the adoption of these products are happening sooner than they would think. In some cases, the old legacy platforms are no longer as relevant because that office workflow is no longer there.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting from the remote perspective. I had a friend the other day who wanted to have a meeting and sent a $20 Grubhub gift card for the meeting. So basically, it's like a breakfast meeting still,
That's
but
awesome.
they,
I
they
love that.
sent some. So I mean, that to me though was like blew my mind for some reason that I'd never thought about that. And these are all just little things that people can do to
Yep.
make this current situation better and maximize it even more. And I know you've talked some great ideas. I just that was
Yeah.
one that I wanted to share that was on top of my head as well that I really
I
liked.
love that. That's good.
Yeah, it's good. So tell me this. So we talked about the content you're writing, and I mean you're a contributor for Forbes. I know you've written for other big publications before. Kind of shifting gears a little bit from remote and Silicon Valley. Let's talk about content specifically for you because I think that's also really applicable in today's environment. What has that done for you and your brand, and what's your advice for people that are trying to get more content out there?
Yeah, this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. Actually, prior to this call, I was on a call with somebody who was trying to figure out how to start creating for themselves, sort of what are the platforms they should use, how to ideate. The big takeaway I had from that prior conversation was we're all actually consuming far more content. As a
Hmm.
result of that, people want to understand how they can contribute to that, right? Obviously, whether it's Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, you name it, there's that type of content, but written form, video, interviews, right? Industry content. This is stuff that's becoming far more relevant. One, because we have the time and space to do it in a way that we really didn't have it that much in an office setting. And two, I think people see this time as an opportunity to build a brand and a name for themselves. And I think it makes sense, right? Both from a career development standpoint, but also just sharing your thoughts and ideas, right? We all have these, different things we're interested in. The more you can actually put it out there, the better. So how do you approach doing that? First, it's figure out like what are the things you're interested in. There are
Yep.
so many platforms, WordPress, Medium, Substack, that allow you to document your ideas, get them out there in the world, and see where it resonates with what audiences, right? So I think first and foremost, figure out what you're interested in. For me, it's always been technology or business or professional development. So I tend to write about those things. For
Yep.
you, it might be marketing or branding, whatever it is. But finding those topics that you're super interested in, document on it, create a pattern, a cadence that you can really stick to it and kind of gain that skill and that muscle, and then figure out what platforms you want to experiment on. At the end of the day, you have to iterate, you have to test. Some things are going to work, some things aren't, but you got to try things out. And I think LinkedIn is a phenomenal platform. I know you
Yeah.
use it really well. But get your stuff out there, right? Just find out what people want to hear, where it crosses over with what you're interested in,
Yep.
and keep it. It takes time. I've been doing it for a long time, so it becomes a little easier. But if I was starting today, I would just build a habit and start putting effort in.
Yeah, and you said something recently. In fact, it was in your newsletter that I received to where you stopped worrying about the numbers. You know, you just started worrying about just putting out what you like. I think that's also important for people to realize that, you know, don't worry about engagements and numbers right away. Worry about getting your passion and your voice out there and being consistent.
Absolutely.
What if I'm into short form dancing content? Is there a platform that I could do that on?
There's always a platform for something, right? Like at the end of the day, I think we're lucky. We're living in a time where social media is here. It's here to stay, right? In every facet, right? Whether it's written, video, audio, there's something out there for everyone. TikTok, and as we're recording this, with some question around how long, if we can use it in the United States for quite some time, we'll
Yeah.
see. That's a great platform where you can put content out in so many different ways, right? But beyond that, like the traditional social media, it creates an environment for anyone to share. And if
Yeah.
that doesn't, float your boat, then find a easy blogging platform you can write on. So whatever works.
Yeah. Very cool. Mark, I appreciate the time. This is super helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Good seeing you.
All right, man.